is Piotr Medvedev, and I'm a partner at EY Global Energy Practice. So I'll be your moderator for this panel. The first speaker today is a Deputy Minister of Energy of the Russian Federation, who will say a few welcoming words. So, Mr. Deputy Minister, your turn.
Dear colleagues, thank you very much. Do you hear me? Oh, thank you. Let me welcome you here and at the launching of the first studies of the Brics Energy Research Cooperation Platform. Energy report and energy technology report are the results of our joint work. Yesterday, you know, Brics Ministers of Energy approved this work, and today we present it to the broad audience. Thank you for your participations. Today we see that there is lack of points of view from the emerging countries. We need to add them to our forecasts. We studied reports of international agencies and organizations and concluded that no one included Brics as a group of countries. These studies are the first effort to indicate our vision of Brics' role as a group of countries and the global energy market. Our countries agreed that they must play a bigger role in the global energy agenda according to our share in the world energy production and consumption. We strongly support that efficient using of energy sources, including fossil fuels, nuclear, and renewables, is necessary to cover growing demand for energy, providing universal access to energy, and ensuring the energy security. Some words about presentation. There are many participants at our presentation today, including research institutes and Brics energy companies, international organizations like International Energy Forum, APEC, Gas Exporting Countries Forum, Clean Energy Ministerial, World Energy Council. It means for us that the world community is interested in Brics' vision. We believe that these studies will be useful and other countries too, and we will help them find joint projects. It's quite obvious that the global energy sector faces great transformation. The structure of the energy industry will change, both on demand and supply. According to the Brics Energy Platform estimates, the share of fossil fuel and will be more than 70% in the countries by 2040. At the same time, there is active support among Brics countries of so-called energy transition. Within the last 10 years, our countries achieved the following: 30% increase in global gas consumption, 50% increase of renewable energy consumption, including hydropower. Nuclear power output increased more than 2 times. There are many issues of our countries that we need to concentrate on. For example, when we ensure reliable energy supply and cover the growing demand, we shouldn't forget about balance between safety environment and access to energy. Another interesting question is how will Brics transport sector will be developed? What will the proportion of different kinds of fuel be? All these things are discussed in our studies. I hope that today we will have interesting discussion and different points of view. So let's start presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Minister, for the words of encouragement. And obviously, one of the reasons why we're here today is actually to celebrate the launch of the Brics Energy Report. That is a result of, in my view, colossal efforts of representatives of 5 Brics countries who, despite pandemics, managed to achieve a goal set for them. As we discussed, to me, it's interesting that, and I represent one of these 5 countries, I actually didn't realize that these 5 countries today represent almost 40% of global energy consumption and 34% of energy supply. The report is based on statistical data and internal forecast of individual countries, and will be and I personally learned a lot as I went through it last night. When we prepared for this session, we discussed a lot with participants whether we actually have too many reports today because lots of organizations issue the outlooks, the forecasts. And the conclusion was that no, we actually need more points of view. And as Deputy Minister said, we do believe that Brics countries need to formulate their own point of view on the energy issues that we all collectively face. Partially because we now face a very uncertain time, largely due to the pandemics, and again, COVID-19 pandemic weighs very heavily on economic outlooks of all of our countries. But also, interesting enough, the latest technological developments, and we will have a separate session on energy technology, they do force us to rethink and put an extra stress on fuel competition. That is largely due to just the existing technical progress. We all know that levelized cost of energy generated by solar and wind is 2 to 3 times less than at the end of 2014. The cost of the lithium batteries is below the level of early 2010s by almost 85%. What is also interesting to me is that while the economic crisis lots of time put drag on decarbonization, today this is highly unlikely. We actually do forecast that the CO2 emission will not surpass pre-COVID 2019 level until 2027, even though the energy demand will hopefully return to its pre-COVID level much earlier than that. Just reflects the change in the energy mix in which renewables prove resilient and flourish in a post-pandemic recovery. What is also interesting and is, again, the fact that these uncertainties that we face, they're recognized by all the market players. To me, we trace the progress of BP energy outlook. Those of you who are familiar with the report would remember that back in 2018, BP had on one scenario in the energy outlook. In 2019, they introduced a second scenario, and the scenario and the 2020 report already has 3 scenarios. And what is most interesting about the 2020 report to me is that in the preamble to the report, it clearly states that all the 3 scenarios will be wrong, given the uncertainties we face. So, again, our point of view is that in a world that is so uncertain, and where the BRIC countries play such an important role, we do need to have a point of view that we commonly develop that we'll be able to articulate today. On this, I'm very pleased to present to you Mr. Vyacheslav Kulagin. Vyacheslav is the department head of Energy Research Institute of Russian Academy of Science, and the mastermind behind the report who actually led preparation of this report. Vyacheslav, over to you.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm happy that I have the opportunity to present to you this piece of work done by 5 countries, something we did all together very intensively over the last year. What objectives we faced? First of all, we wanted to tell the world about who we are in that world, in that energy world. We wanted to outline the current status and in what direction we want to develop. And we want to speak on behalf of Brics rather than people had to find it out in other data resources. In the framework of our practical interaction, it was quite interesting to somehow streamline the cooperation mechanism with the countries to test how we do some joint research in different formats, and likely we succeeded in that. We wanted to look at where we're going to move forward and what opportunities for cooperation and interaction within Brics are available there so that we could be resilient in our development. All the goals were attained, and even bearing in mind the peculiar features of this year and the challenges of that year, we even managed to outperform some of our targets. From the very outset, I would like to thank all the countries for taking an active part in that work. And I would like to stress that here we are speaking about the participation of all the countries, meaning that all the countries prepared certain section on its own, told us about themselves and participated in some joint sections, and after that we just verified all these data. So it means that all the 5 countries made a great contribution. I'd like to thank the representatives of the Russian Ministry of Energy, which provided for coordination of the whole process. Let's have a look at what Brics nations are about today. They account for about 1/3 of global energy. By 2040, it will be about 40%. And you see that the consumption share of the primary energy will surpass 40%, and the production will be close to that share, especially in gas production. Today, actually, Brics accounts for 20% of gas consumption, but in several years, actually, we'll see an increase by 7%. Yesterday, there was a ministerial meeting, and representatives of China outlined how fast the gas consumption grows there and what has to be done there. So where the gas production will grow from 34 to 36%, the coal production and coal consumption would go down. I'd like to pay special attention to the fact that as concerns all the energy sources, we have very good opportunities to increase production. So it means that we can meet the demand and provide even more figures than the ones which you see on the slide. But it would depend on the supply demand. If we have more demand, we'll have more supply. Nuclear energy and RES, renewables. In terms of nuclear energy, a lot of progress has been done in Brics nations. And it is expected that this impetus would support it and will see a major increase in the upcoming years. And Brics will contribute dramatically to that. In terms of oil, we account for 21% in terms of oil production. And we expected that the opportunities which are available there in terms of the resources will actually help us to maintain this 21%. In terms of the consumption, the situation is quite peculiar. And such studies are interesting in the fact that throughout the year, when we communicated to our colleagues from other nations, lively discussion focused on the transport sector. We all know that the transport sector undergoes certain transformations. Petroleum products were dominating there, but now there is a competition between the items of the energy mix. When we discussed that, different countries said that some of they see the rise in the number of electric vehicles, other focus on biofuels or gas run vehicles, and there might be a combination of different engines, and certainly a special focus was made on the energy efficiency of the vehicles and their availability. And when we looked at actually these forks in the road, a whole bunch of scenarios can be proposed, and we can increase our contribution to the global energy going beyond 27%, or even this share may shrink when the petroleum products can be substituted with some alternative sources. So it means that there are a lot of forks in the road, and I think that this gives us a lot of reasons to think about how we are going to live in the next 20 years and how the energy sector will develop, and we are ready to cooperate. Look at what is going on in terms of the energy mix. We see that over the next 20 years, the share of oil and gas coal will decrease, but at the same time, we'll see an increase in the renewables, natural gas, and nuclear power. But the circles are of different size on purpose, because actually we'll see a dramatic growth in the energy consumption, and we see the shrinking of the share. It doesn't mean that it would be about the shrinkage of the absolute figures. all the items of the energy mix will rise. And if you look at the report, you will see the structure in terms of the energy generation, electric power generation, and for instance, the share of coal will decrease from 60% to 30%, and gas and renewables and nuclear will grow by 10%. It means that major transformations are to happen in the energy sector. Look at 2040. Still, three-fourths of energy would be provided by fossil fuels in the general energy mix. In power generation, certainly the role of fossil fuels would be less, but nuclear, renewable sources, and gas, actually, they account for half of the energy mix. And the power generation will also be provided by these sources of energy. I'd like to draw attention to the following thing. These are the Brics nations, which provide for 30% of the rise in consumption of gas over the last 10 years. Brics account for 50% in consumption of RES, or renewables, and actually, but for Brics nations, the nuclear power consumption would decrease by 12%, whereas actually now it has dropped only by 2%. Clean energy has become a buzzword, and it has become a hot spot, a hot topic for all the countries. But if we look at what countries are making a major input into that, we see that the role of Brics nations is totally indisputable. This is what we have observed over the last 10 years. And we expect that this impetus would be maintained in the years to come. Let's look at the energy trade. You may see the change in the energy trade over the last 10 years and how it may develop until 2040. You may see that both inputs and exports, inbound and outbound of Brics nations is rising. So gas imports used to be zero, now it rises. Coal grew. The same is true of oil and gas, but in the upcoming 20 years, these figures would be more weighty, so to say. And you will see that actually 1/3 of the trade would be done by Brics nations. I'd like to draw your attention to that slide and to the previous slides. I'm speaking about fuels, but fuel is not the only thing which energy sector does. We're also producing energy equipment. The trade in energy equipment will rise. A major share of energy equipment, again, in the part of the clean energy, where the nuclear power plants will be produced and what NPPs are going to be supplied all over the world, where solar panels and windmills are going to be produced. I think we can say that Brics actually has taken a major stake in this market, and this stake will rise in future. Quite unexpectedly, we had to face the pandemic earlier the year. We certainly didn't anticipate that in the middle of the year, bearing in mind what is going on. At our meetings, we exchanged opinions how the countries address the existing challenges and problems. And at one of the meetings, a decision was taken to share our experience with the world, how we see future development of energy under these conditions. And therefore, there is a special section on COVID which emerged in our report. Every country told the world how they are living amid COVID and where they are going to move. When we aggregated the data, it turned out that we have some consolidated experience of Brics nations, what to be done. So we have highlighted 4 main items: stimulated demand for national economies, targeted subsidies for vulnerable categories of consumers. Number 3, this is about providing concessional loans and government subsidies to companies most affected by the pandemic. And fourthly, this is about providing targeted tax benefits to various sectors of the economy where we see some problems. But most interesting thing is that all the countries, despite what is going on, retained and maintained their plans in terms of building infrastructure, implementation of the energy projects. There are some certain amendments and changes, but all the countries stated that we will inevitably get out of that situation, and therefore the exit from that situation will necessitate new objectives before the energy sector, and all the 5 countries are approaching the energy planning from that standpoint. In brief, in a nutshell, let me outline what is going on per country. You may see the flow chart on energy in Brazil. The main objectives, so the set of 7 goals and objectives. To save up time, I will not list all of them. You may see that on the slide. Out of the main ones, actually, I may say that there is a good opportunity to increase energy production. Today, actually, the production only slightly exceeds the consumption. In 10 or 20 years, Brazil will produce surplus production to export it. And still, renewables will play a major role in the energy mix, and this is determined by the geographical features of the country, Russia. In Russia, we have enormous opportunities, enormous reserves in terms of energy sources, and therefore we see the major increase of foreign gas, natural gas. There are very good reserves and resources, and there is a fork in the road, meaning that there are alternative scenarios as to what volume gas will be supplied to the international markets. Not necessarily, actually, the surplus gas would be supplied abroad. And you see about promoting the exports and imports, and their export may double. And Russia can cope with that objective. There are very good opportunities to increase coal export, but again, everything would be dependent on the supply and demand. Renewable sources and nuclear power, we expect a rapid growth there, and there are lots of factors which may determine the competitiveness. And in terms of oil, we anticipate the retaining of the production rate, but depending on the situation in the market, India, the demand for all the items of the energy mix is going up, and you see the flow chart following 2 scenarios. But in either scenario, the consumption of all types of energy sources is on the rise, and this meets the Indian plans to increase accessibility of energy, power generation, sustainability of energy supplies. A key role still is played by coal, but the share of all the alternative sources goes up. All the alternative sources, gas, renewables, and nuclear power are on the rise. A whole mix of energy sources plays a special role there. Certainly, the economy demands all the sources of energy to be employed. Energy of China, we know that in China, coal plays a dominating role, and there are quite ambitious goals, and you know that in the long run, China actually promotes carbon neutrality. In the framework of our dialogue, we discussed how the countries have to approach these goals, and inevitably we'll have to reduce the consumption of coal and increase the consumption of gas and renewables and nuclear power, and this meets the programs which are on the table. South Africa again bets on coal, which actually is explained by the availability of coal deposits, but the country is not fixated on that. South Africa is looking at other energy sources to provide for sustainable and stable energy supplies 24/7, so to say. So that 24/7 they could have light where it is necessary. What else so interesting I would like to note? All the countries have outlined their goals, how they see the development of energy, where the energy is going to move. But when we all looked at that, actually, we were surprised a little bit. because the countries are different. Some countries are major exporters, others are importers. We have actually totally different energy mixes and different types of fuels and different conditions for the energy sector functioning, but we see that the goals are common. What goals, I mean? First of all, availability of energy, not just the physical availability of energy, but also the economic availability. So it means that the decisions which we're taking in our countries have to be competitive. This is a question of sustainability of energy supply. So really, the consumers should not suffer from outages or interruptions. And therefore, we can share our experience because Russia, for instance, has a very good, very rich experience. This year, we actually celebrate 100th anniversary of the Oil Raw program, the program of energy supply to all the regions of Russia, and a lot has been done in terms of providing the energy security. Environmental friendliness and sustainability now are coming at fore. So it means that energy sector should follow the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'd like to note especially explicitly that all the countries show great interest to the new solutions, new technological solutions, new types of energy mix. We are all looking for the ways to enter the energy of the future. And the meetings which preceded that session discussed all these things, and these aspirations actually were reflected in the report by all the countries. We just made an aggregation. And to conclude my remarks, the last slide is dedicated to the priorities for joint development. What are the priorities there for the cooperation between our countries? First of all, this is about scientific and technological cooperation, really. We have lots of goals in front of us, and we'll realize that we can address these goals on our own, spending $50 billion each on the same research, or we can cooperate and decrease the costs several times and spend much less. Question of energy efficiency. For many years, Brics has a working group on energy efficiency, and this is one of our top priorities. And really, the countries exchange their experience, the managerial and the practical experience. Then expanding the use of gas. We are sharing experience in that direction. We also discussed the diversification of consumption in the transport sector. What solutions can be used? We looked at biofuels, gas-powered transport, and hydrogen vehicles, electric vehicles, a whole range of solutions for the transport of future. And these solutions may be local, depending on what kinds of vehicles we're speaking about, the cargo vehicles or the light vehicles, public transportation. Several countries at once expressed their desire to speak in more detail about that and to make that a subject matter for our further work. One more way is improving the efficiency of the government administration in the energy sector. You know that many of us are reforming and reshaping energy sector. Pricing policy is being changed. There are a lot of very sophisticated objectives which we're facing, all the countries are facing. And the public bodies and administrations will probably appreciate the tips and pieces of advice of those who have already done something in that respect.
It's important to promote the global issues associated with energy markets. We account for more than 40% of energy in the world. We work in several directions, so it makes very good sense that Brics' opinion should be decisive in global energy matters. There's one line of work that has been quite successful for a number of years, that is youth involvement in energy cooperation. We also need to improve the stability of the energy complex, especially today at the time of transformation. in this sector. We see quite a number of technologies that have great prospects so that we would have sufficient energy supply for the economy. It's also important to look at the expanding payments and direct investment in national currencies. We don't want to be dependent on other countries. We want to promote trade. We want to develop our economies, and we want to do it the way we want it, not the way somebody tells us to do it. And one more point, we see increasing intensity of collaborative research in different fields. And this research results in some outputs that we are talking about today. We have good potential for collaboration, and in years to come, we would be able to use this potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Cycle reporting. It's to me, as you spoke, I couldn't just stop thinking that it's amazing how different we all are in our economies, in our energy consumption, in our objectives. But at the same time, I think the last slide where you spoke of the common ideas that we should be exploring collectively is, to me, it's probably one of the most important slides in your presentation. It's amazing how much we can potentially achieve if we work all together. On this, I'm very pleased to announce we have a very special guest today, Secretary General of International Energy Forum, Joseph McMonigle. Joseph began his 4-year term on 1st of July this year, and as a Secretary General, and he's the first U.S. citizen to hold this position. So congratulations, Mr. McMonigle. Before that, Mr. McMonigle was Vice Chairman of International Energy Agency Board of Governors and Chief of Staff at the U.S. Department of Energy during the George W. Bush administration, where he also served as co-chair of the U.S.-China Energy Working Group. So he's not new to Brics agenda. Before his appointment as the 5th IEF Secretary General, Mr. McMonigle held senior management positions at the Abraham Group, an international energy consultancy he co-founded, and a hedge fund advisory firm based in Washington, D.C. Mr. McMonigle, welcome, please.
Thank you, Peter, very much for the introduction. I also want to thank the Deputy Minister for participating. I don't know if he's still here yet, but I look forward to meeting him, and also to Wisław for the excellent summary of the report. I'd like to express my gratitude to the Ministry of Energy of the Russian Federation for its strong support of IEF and energy dialogue here, and inviting me to the launch of the Brics Energy Report shortly in advance of the Brics Leaders Summit taking place on 17 November under the chairmanship of Russia to strengthen partnerships on global stability, shared security, and innovative growth. It's good to see so many important members of the IEF dialogue represented by distinguished panelists from China, India, and Russia, as well as IEF partner organizations from GECF and also OPEC. As joint responses to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic show, major BRIC economies and leading international energy organizations play a vital role in global energy security. The uncertainty surrounding energy outlooks remains unusually large. Assessments rest on public health and economic factors that are inherently difficult to predict. However, there is even more uncertainty surrounding the damage to supply that requires sharpened collective focus to avoid mismatches down the road. Today, global oil markets find their way toward new balances by guardrails set by consuming and producing countries in the OPEC Plus framework, and through the closer collaboration between Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and also G20 and IEF member countries. Looking ahead, non-OPEC supply will not recover as swiftly as demand. Oil markets are threatened with a loss of supply resilience if there is no action to address the sharp drops in energy sector investment, rising market uncertainties, and persistent high inventory levels. Sharpening the producer-consumer dialogue and investment and enhancing market transparency on stock data should help secure oil market stability on short-term and medium-term agendas. There is an urgent need to shape cohesive policies for the effective and inclusive transformations we all seek. Investments in high-return infrastructure projects by major economies that help the world achieve universal access to affordable, clean, and reliable energy services and lower carbon dependence can further those objectives. The problem is not the direction, but the speed of change. On the road to a swift, inclusive, and sustainable recovery, natural gas will continue to play a leading role, as shown in the recently released outlooks by OPEC and IEA, and of course we've seen also in the summary of the Brics report today. Though the COVID-19 pandemic will accelerate a decline in global oil demand growth, data shows that decline rates in existing fields and investment in new supply are the relevant issues on which to focus. The world economy will continue to rely on hydrocarbons. The silver lining of COVID-19 pandemic is that producers and consumers have strengthened dialogue and collaboration and sharpened focus on forward-looking energy agendas to achieve shared aspirations. Greater cohesion on policy and technology pathways achieved in the endorsement of the G20 ministers of the circular carbon economy that enables producers and consumers to contribute in different ways to the same aim. The IF will strengthen concerted action to bring smart and integrated energy technologies at the speed and scale that sustainable growth requires to share prosperity across the world regions among future generations. The moment to accelerate is now. Well-functioning, open, and competitive markets will push investment and trade forward. Research spending to facilitate innovation and new technology adoption, the principal drivers of long-term productivity growth and change, will boost inclusive recovery measures for rapid return to global growth that meets all UN goals. In closing, I want to highlight again the importance of greater collaboration between Brazil, Russia, India, and China as key IEF producers and consumers. The IEF stands ready to help facilitate this collaboration among major economies, which I believe will help energy markets recover and serve as a powerful remedy to the uncertainty and volatility we see throughout the world. With the support of Brazil, Russia, India, and China, the IEF will take the outcomes of the G20 ministers meeting forward and take today's outcomes of the report and the BRIC leaders meeting next month on board as well. Lastly, I just want to highlight the 7th IEF IGU Ministerial Gas Forum that will be hosted by Malaysia on 3 December. And of course, the next 17th IEF International Energy Ministerial and Business Forum that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will host in 2021. Both events will help advance our dialogue and deepen our collaboration. Again, it's great to be with you, and I wish you a successful conference here.
Thank you very much. It's amazing to see that I think the theme of dialogue and cooperation seems to be very recurring, the same as sustainable development in energy space. So thank you so much. On the panel day, I'm very lucky to have a number of very distinguished panelists with us, albeit virtually only. These are representatives of multilateral organizations, research institutes, academia, and energy associations. So we will explore today different perspectives and reflections on energy policy and conclusions of the Brics Energy Report. Unfortunately, due to the format and time constraint, we won't be able to ask any questions, but I'm sure if you would want to follow up, then we'll be able to organize this. The first today is Dr. Wang, who is the head of the preparatory group for the Energy Economics Research Institute, CNUC, and professor of China University of Petroleum, based out of Beijing. Welcome, Dr. Zhang. Doctor, it would be very interesting to learn of your perspective on the main drivers for change in the energy balance in China. We heard from Vyacheslav and that China declared its intent to become carbon neutral by 2060. what changes in today's energy balance of China were driven by, let's put it this way, by an invisible hand of the markets, and which had to be sponsored by the government to get the initial ball rolling? I also wonder if you can reflect on areas, going back to Viacheslav's last slide, of future cooperation in the field of energy policy between Brics countries where it relates to fossil and renewable energy. Dr. Wang, please.
Thanks, Peter. So it's my pleasure to participate in this discussions. So the first is congratulations on the Brics energy report. So it's very useful and meaningful to expand the cooperation among the Brics countries, especially in the energy aspects. So the China, so as you mentioned, so the president of the China, Xi Jinping, mentioned this China will to finish the carbon emission net zero in 2060. Of course, it's very hard target for China. As you know, so China is still a developing country and is in the process of the industrialization. And also we know so that China will let the CO2 emission will peak in the 2030. So I believe so if the target is very, very hard, but for China, so we must to push the policies to push the change of the energy industries as well as the industrialization of the energy. So if so, the China rank #1 in most of the renewable departments, especially the wind power and the solar. So rank #1 in the capacity as also the production. But as you know, the China consumed too much of the total energy, and the non-the coal still amounted to 57% in the primary energy mix. So for China, so how to, on one side, to reduce the coal in the energy mix, at the same time to increase the renewables as well as the natural gas in the total energy consumption mix. So I believe so that from the policy, of course, is very important. So the government is now made the 14th five-year plan, and especially on the end of this month, so the CPC will have the a very important meeting, National Party Congress meeting, to publish the 14th five-year guidelines. And this guideline, of course, will supervise and give some support to the next 5 years. And among the most important in the energy, of course, to reduce the coal, at the same time to increase the renewables as well as natural gas. So if the renewable will make much progress in the future, but I believe the natural gas is very important for China. So, and nowadays, so the natural gas is still a lot higher compared to the world average. And in the future, I believe so the natural gas, the increase of natural gas will quickly. And on the other side, so the some of the carbon emission technologies, energy efficiency technologies, as well as how to reduce the carbon emission will become very, very important. And China will start a new future exchanges focused on the carbon emission in Guangzhou. And this will be the fifth future exchanges in China. So I believe this is a very important step toward to reduce the carbon emission using the financial markets. And at the same time, of course, so this year we lost the COVID pandemic had a very important, of course, negative impact on the economies as well as the energy industries. And compared to the last year, so the energy, especially the oil, even nowadays is recovery. But in the first half of this year, so the oil decreased, and the natural gas, of course, is okay. Even if the growth rate is not so higher, but so it's still keeping the growth. And China's government makes a very strict policy towards the COVID pandemic. So, and the third quarter of this year, so the GDP growth will recovery and will maybe amount to the 5% in this quarter. And on the total year of this year, even if the GDP growth decrease, but and will be amount to the 2% totally of this year. So I mean, so even if the COVID pandemic has very big impact on the economy as well as the energy, but compared to the international world, so the Chinese government takes a very strict policy, and the economy still keeping the positive growth. And on the future, of course, we find, so especially for this year, energy security becomes very important in China. So, and if we can, if we consider the trade war between China and the United States, as well as some of the geopolitical issues, so the energy security, especially the crude oil and the natural gas, will become very important in China as well as the world. So in the future, I believe the cooperation between the Brics countries have very big future. So there will be something important from my point. So the first, of course, is on the investment and the trade among the Brics countries. So just as we know from the report, so the Brics countries are the very important producers of the energy as well as the consumers of energy. So the 5 countries can increase the mutual demand to expand the investment in the upstream of the oil and gas as well as the renewables, and also to expand the trade, especially the oil and gas trade in the future. So the second, of course, to expand the technology, especially the technology in the energy saving as well as the renewable part. So I believe so the 5 countries can do more to expand the energy technology cooperation. So the third one, of course, to increase the international energy governance. So we know so that the international world is changing, and the energy governance is also lead to increase. And from this perspective, so the Brics countries have more cooperative beneficial from each other. So how to increase the energy governance, such as gas pricing, and also so the oil pricing. So I believe there are a lot of the potential benefits to cooperate among these countries. So the third one, of course, so the beyond the energy. So I believe the Brics countries can do more in the financial aspects. So energy, of course, needs the support of the capital, needs support of the money. So from this perspective, so the Brics countries can do more in the currency swamps to support the energy trade and investment. So the first one, of course, so to expand the cooperation on the research, technology research, as well as dialogue. So maybe we can do much more summit or so the conference among the 5 countries to do more to promote the energy dialogue, of course, including the youth to the young generation to dialogue, to have much more dialogue, to increase the beliefs. So this is my perspective from the 5 countries, the Brics energy cooperation in the future. So thank you. This is my point.
Thank you so much. You raised one very important point. We will actually cover in the second session more details when we speak about the potential cooperation in development of energy technology. And I'm very pleased that as a person from a private sector myself, that you actually mentioned a need to actually finance those research activities, because obviously money will not come out of thin air. All of the 5 countries need to find a way to create this funding. Thank you so much. Our next panelist, it's a particular pleasure for me to introduce my fellow compatriot and one of the smartest brains in Russian energy sector, Dr. Tatiana Mitrova. I will not have time to go through all of Tatiana's post-Strolls achievements, but her select few are: she's a director of Energy Center at Skolkovo Business School. She's a senior research fellow in the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies. She is scientific advisor at the Energy Research Institute of Russian Academy of Science. She's a visiting fellow of the Center of Global Energy Policy at Columbia University. She's distinguished research fellow at Institute of Energy Economics in Japan. She's a very vocal supporter of women leadership in business and academia, etc., etc. So just to make sure that I don't spend the rest of our time today going through Tatiana's biography, Tatiana, just moving on to the point of discussion, you're an expert at global energy issues, but also someone who naturally focuses a lot on issues of Russian energy policy. And I wonder if you can please share your thoughts on the findings of the Brics Energy Report, but also on the lessons that we as a country can learn from it. Please, Tatiana.
Great, thank you, Peter. Thank you. Thank you for this kind introduction, and congratulations for this fantastic work that Brics has produced recently and which was presented today. I think it's really a great step forward in our energy cooperation, and I would completely agree with Vyacheslav, who said in his presentation that amazingly, despite all the differences, there are so many similarities in our energy policies and our energy aspirations, I would say. And I think it's quite understandable. All the countries in the world, when they are developing their energy policy, they are actually trying to balance, like in any sustainable development paradigm, they are trying to balance social development and economic prosperity. They are trying to keep at the same time protected safety and security of their states and energy systems, and at the same time to remain environmentally friendly and to provide for environmental security. So basically we end up again with this famous ESG abbreviation, and basically I think we all have this intention to keep this balance, which is really so difficult to achieve, but we all have quite different starting positions, and just geography, climate, the level of insulation, and many other things, and some historical traditions which are already fixed in our energy policies. So I think one of the most interesting things that Brics could bring to the global discussion is this message that basically as long as countries are developing their energy policies to the benefit of their citizens and to the benefit of the global environment and climate, let them do it in their own way. I would stress again, we are all talking about energy transition, and there is some typical energy transition paradigm which limits to more renewables, less fossil fuels, full stop. But actually the world is much more complex, and there is a great variety of the paths towards this energy transition and decarbonization, which is the main goal of energy transition. And in this journey, actually each country can contribute its own thoughts, technologies, approaches. It was mentioned today already, and I think for Russia it's quite understandable, one of the largest world oil and gas producers. Of course, we believe that there is a role to play for hydrocarbons in the clean future. But this will be different hydrocarbons. They will be processed and transported and produced in a different way with CCUS, with the blue hydrogen or even turquoise hydrogen, with the other technologies which are under development currently. And that could be a contribution for the whole world. Another example, nuclear energy, which is, frankly speaking, not that much regarded as a part of the energy transition in Europe, for example. Some of the European countries, they are planning to phase out nuclear, and the population is really very skeptical even about yellow hydrogen produced using nuclear energy, not even speaking about nuclear power plants. But looking at the global challenge for decarbonization, we can see that basically so far we are failing to deliver the results which are necessary to keep the global warming below 1.5 degrees. We are not on this trajectory, and only COVID-19, such a tremendous disaster, has slowed down temporary this growth in CO2 emissions. We understand that as soon as economic recovery will start, we will get back to this trajectory. So all the technologies, all the methods of decarbonization are needed. Every flower should bloom in order to reach the goals which are actually exceeding anything that humankind has ever faced. So this is a threat far, far worse than COVID-19, which has paralyzed the whole world. But if you look at the modeling of the potential climate disasters and climate damage, it could be much stronger. So if we want to avoid this challenge, we should really join our forces and stay as technology neutral as possible, and allow all countries to contribute to this new global paradigm. And in this respect, I think that all the discoveries and ideas and new propositions from the Russian side, from China, from Brazil, from South Africa, from OPEC countries, they should be regarded in a very in-depth way, so that we could really develop a competition of ideas, not in a dogmatic way. So I think I'll stop on that, and thank you again for this amazing opportunity to participate in this event today.
Thank you. Thank you personally for adding 2 more colors to hydrogen. It used to be only green and blue, now it's also turquoise and yellow. Right, that's we'll eventually get to the full rainbow spectrum. But also, I mean, you touched on a very interesting point that, again, we will be covering in the next session on technology. What should be the role of the governments? Do the governments need to place their bets on specific technologies and just decide that, for example, blue hydrogen is bad, green hydrogen is good? Or should they rather, through policy measures, establish the overall objective that we need to reach as a society, for example, reduce CO2 emission, and then let the let the businesses and the markets and the technology see what plays best in this space. So again, something that we'll discuss after the coffee break. But thank you very much indeed. Our next speaker is Dr. Benyusev, who is a head of energy studies department of OPEC, based out of Vienna. Dr. Benyusev is prior to joining OPEC in September 17, he was a director of studies and knowledge management at the Algerian national oil company, Sonatrach, and also worked at the Algerian Ministry of Energy and Mines. And for many years was engaged as a lecturer and researcher at the Algerian Petroleum Institute. Dr. Benyusev has a PhD in energy economics from French Petroleum Institute out of Paris, and published numerous papers and reports on the matter. Dr. Benyusev, obviously last week OPEC issued its 2020 edition of the World Oil Outlook. Can you please share some of the funding from this report that you believe would be relevant for our audience? And also comment on areas where you believe OPEC and Brics countries can cooperate in a more focused way. Dr. Benyusev, please.
Thank you very much, Peter, for the kind introduction. Today, in fact, on behalf of His Excellency Mohammed Sanusi Barkindo, OPEC Secretary General, I would like to extend deep thanks for inviting OPEC to participate in this important panel to discuss the outcomes presented in the Brics Energy Report. I would like to congratulate you on launching the first edition of this report, which includes very insightful data analysis and outlooks for individual Brics countries. I have read it carefully, and it was a pleasure to see that the presented outlook is in line with our World Oil Outlook launched last week, that I will share some key takeaways during this speech. The launch of this report, I mean the energy report, present a key element within the Brics Energy Week, which we are closely following. We congratulate the Russian Federation and the Minister of Energy on hosting the Brics chairmanship in 2020. Cooperating with Brics countries and sharing information is essential for OPEC and its research. Not only are two Brics countries key economies in energy growth and oil use over the coming decades, other Brics countries are also crucial on non-OPEC producers. We are encouraged by the collaboration with Brics countries during the previous year, and today, even the first annual meeting of Brics Energy Research Platform, the first analytical report by Brics country is being presented, is a milestone. We hope to see this become a regular event, as this coverage is truly essential for all those involved in the energy industry. We are also encouraged by collaboration brought by this event, including the fifth meeting of Brics Energy Ministers held yesterday via video conference and chaired by His Excellency Alexander Novak, Russian Minister of Energy, a gifted diplomat who is also a key player in the OPEC Declaration of Cooperation. The discussion at this meeting reflects a lot of work OPEC is also undertaking, including the continuation of international efforts to overcome the impact of COVID-19 on the energy sector, promotion of the energy dialogue, and the expansion of technological cooperation. As the moderator, Peter, said, that I will share with you some key findings of the World Oil Outlook launched last week. This is in fact to provide the OPEC Secretariat in-depth look at the unprecedented scale and impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the global energy and oil market. For the first time, this year's publication extends to the outlook to 2045. This provides an additional 5 years or windows to examine developments on global energy and oil demand, oil supply and refining, the global economy, policy and technology developments, demographic trends, environmental issues, and sustainable development. This also includes outlook for individual countries, including most of the Brics countries. I would like also to stress that in this year of great uncertainties, this is not no 2020 vision. The World Oil Outlook is not a book of predictions. Rather, it provides a helpful and insightful reference tool, one that underscores OPEC commitment to knowledge sharing and data transparency. With this in mind, I would like to highlight a few key points, as I've mentioned. In fact, following the drop of energy demand in 2020, we expect that by 2045, energy demand will increase by more than 25% comparing to 2019. This is led or driven mainly by the doubling of GDP worldwide, and also the increase of population by more than 1.7 billion. This is not only population, but also urbanization and also Middle East expansion, particularly in developing countries. At the regional level, we expect also differentiation. By 2040, demand will come mostly from non-developing countries or emerging countries. We expect also in the outlook that all forms of energies will be needed to support post-pandemic recovery and address long-term energy needs. There is no one-size-fits-all solutions. As mentioned by many distinguished panelists, renewable energy will continue to grow going forward, rising significantly faster than any other source of energy at an average from 6.6% annually. Secondly, natural gas will be the fast-growing fossil fuel during the forecast period, driven partially by higher urbanization rates, industrial demand, and its competitiveness over coal in power generation. OPEC and its member countries recognize the importance of renewables to broaden the energy mix and to address global challenges of climate change. Fully supportive of Paris Agreement, our member countries are embarking on their own ambitious plans to diversify their energy portfolios. Nonetheless, petroleum sector is and will remain the study foundation for meeting global energy demands, and an assessment that is widely shared by other leading agencies. In fact, we expect oil to attain the largest share of the energy mix throughout the forecast period, providing nearly 28% of global needs in 2045, following by gas and coal. Assuming that COVID-19 will be in fact largely contained in the coming years, oil demand will increase by around 10 million barrels a day from 2018 to 2045. In OECD countries, oil demand is expected to plateau. However, a large increase will come from non-OECD countries, led by India and China. Turning now to the supply side, we expect non-OPEC liquids to recover from the pandemic-related shut-in the medium term. Looking further ahead, a few non-OPEC producers show meaningful supply growth, including Brics countries, Brazil, as well as Canada, Qatar, Kazakhstan, Guyana. In fact, Brazil is expected to lead Latin American growth in the medium term, with total liquid supply set to increase from 3.5 million barrels a day in 2019 to more than 5.2 million barrels in 2025. The country sees substantial investment and production increases in its ultra-deepwater pre-salt assets. The Russian Federation, also a Brics member, sees 400,000 million barrel a day expansion to 11.8 million barrel a day by 2025. Beyond the countries, most of other non-OPEC producers are likely to see output to stagnate or decline. As a result, non-OPEC supply falls from a peak of nearly 72 million barrels a day by the end of this decade to around 65 million barrels a day by 2045. OPEC liquids will increase from nearly 34 million barrels a day in 2019 to 44 million barrels a day by 2045. Regarding the downstream, we expect the refining capacity to increase by around 15.6 million barrels a day between 2019 and 2045. Mainly, this capacity is coming from Asia Pacific and Middle East. When we turn back to the investment, and it's very important and critical element to meet this demand increase, we expect more than 12 trillion US dollar investment in the upstream, midstream, and downstream to meet this increase in oil demand. The action taken by OPEC member countries, together with non-OPEC countries in declaration of cooperation, have helped reduce volatility in the market, all marked by the stability and led the foundation for recovery. This is what has been mentioned by His Excellency, the Secretary General of IIF in his opening remarks. I'm certain that the momentum of our expanded dialogue and cooperation will be flourished with the passing of time. The engagement between OPEC and Brics countries has been moving forward from strength to strength. Talks are part of OPEC's robust and growing energy dialogue program. The pace of has strongly accelerated over the past few decades. Each of Brics countries is an essential partner within this program. We hope to continue to grow our engagement with Brics states, which currently includes bilaterals, high-level and technical meetings. A recovery from the COVID-19 will inevitably be slower than the shock. We must bear in mind that these efforts require time and patience. However, we firmly believe that Brics countries will lead and help this recovery process. There is no better time than now to work together to build a more secure, sustainable, and resilient energy future. OPEC is here as your partner in this essential task. On a final note, I would like to encourage you to download free of charge the detailed World Oil Outlook, which is available in our website at woo.opec.org. This essential source of information is also available using iOS and Android apps. Finally, I would like to reiterate our thanks to the organizers and also distinguished panelists. And again, I wish you a successful launch of the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Youssef. Thank you for promoting a knowledge database. And by the way, I particularly liked that you bypassed the ban on use of slides by panelists using the banners in your background. It was a very good move. Thank you so much. My only ask from the panelists on a going forward basis, please do limit your presentations to 5 minutes. We are slightly out of time. The next panelist is Mr. Nandra Kumar, who is the Director General of Central Power Research Institute in India. He holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and master's degree in high voltage engineering, and has more than 30 years of experience in the field of electric power. He's based out of Bangalore, and again leads the Central Power Research Institute, that is an organization under the Ministry of Power that is in charge of research and testing activities. Mr. Nandra Kumar, I mean, the pace of energy transition in India is, I mean, to me, it's extremely impressive. Your projections for energy demand growth are very ambitious. especially given the intent to meet this increase with disproportionate growth of renewables, wind, solar, small hydro, etc. Can you please share with us kind of the secret sauce that is fueling India's energy ambitions? Mr. Nandu Kumar, please. Sorry, we cannot hear you. You're probably on mute.
Very good afternoon to the distinguished panelists. I've heard an enlightening talk by the other panelists thus far. So I will make a small presentation on the initiatives and the interventions our government of India has done into getting into the energy scenario of the country, where we are now and where we go from here. So next slide, please. Brics countries account about 30% of the global demand, and this will continue to grow. India is the third largest energy user in the world. Fossil fuel remains the main source of our energy, but renewable energy, we reiterate that the renewable and clean energy and energy efficiency can contribute an important driver to promote sustainable development and create economic growth. The government of India has undertaken a two-pronged approach to cater to the increasing energy demand, while ensuring that the global emissions do not lead to irreversible damage of the ecosystem. On the generation side, promotion of renewable sources in the energy mix through solar and wind, and shifting towards low-carbon technologies for the coal-based power plants. Under India's nationally determined contribution, there is a commitment to reduce emission intensity of India by 30 to 35% by 2030 based on 2005 levels. Next slide, please. The next slide. Just to give an idea of the scenario of the energy mix in our country, India provides just over half of its energy consumption to its own production. Against 88% total share of the fossil fuels globally in the primary energy mix in the year 2005, the same fell down to 86% in 2015. With regard to the supply of natural gas, in India, the domestic production of natural gas is far less than the demand. Therefore, LNG is being imported to meet the demand-supply gap. Maturity of the renewable energy technologies. A sharp decline in the prices of wind and solar technologies by about 60 and 52% respectively have led to the change in the relative importance of the energy sources. Renewable energy power accounts to about 35% of the total installed capacity of 371 gigawatt as of June 2020. India is the fifth in the world with the installed renewable energy capacity. The government of India has set a target of achieving 175 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2022, and we are on track to achieve it. The adverse effects of the climate change are much more discernible than ever before, and better understanding of the relationship between energy use and poor environmental outcomes. With regard to energy efficiency, India has made significant progress on improving energy efficiency. Energy efficiency gains in 2000 resulted in avoidance of about 15% more energy use in 2008. The next slide, please. The next slide, please. In order to achieve the strategic goals of energy development, four main key objectives of the Indian electricity policy has been formulated by the National Institution of Transforming India. The first and foremost is access at affordable prices. 100% electrification has been achieved, and the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana was launched by the Honorable Prime Minister to ensure that clean cooking fuel is provided to the women living below the poverty line households across the country, and thus far about 80 million families have been provided with this intervention. Improved security and independence. Improved energy security normally is associated with reduced import dependence and is also an important goal of the policy. India is heavily dependent on oil, gas, and coal imports. Greater sustainability. In India, sustainability is also linked with energy security. 90% of our commercial primary energy supply is being met by imports. Cutting fossil fuel consumption would promote the twin goals of sustainability and security. The policy lays heavy emphasis on decarbonization through the twin interventions of energy efficiency and renewable energy. Economic growth, finally, the energy policy must also support the goal of rapid economic growth. Efficient energy supplies promote growth in two ways: enabling factor for growth, and secondly, being a vast sector in itself, can fuel overall growth in the country. The next slide, please. With regard to the energy industries, liquid fuel, that's crude oil production in India, it is estimated to increase to 45 million tons in 2022 from the present level of 35 metric tons. Coal, NEP predicts coal generation capacity to increase to 330 to 440 gigawatt by the year 2040 from the level of 194 gigawatt at present. This calls for coal production of about 1,300 million tons coal equivalent. The requirement of natural gas will triple from the current level of 45 million cubic meters. The electric power sector, it is estimated to increase threefold from the present level of 4,750 terawatt hour, and the main increase will come from the renewable energy sources. Nuclear power, India plans to increase the installed nuclear capacity to 12 gigawatt by 2022 and 2334 gigawatt by 2040. In scenarios, nationally determined contributions prepared by India as a party to the Paris Agreement deals, which will bring in an installed capacity to 63 gigawatt by 2040. So we have a varied mix of various sources of energy, keeping in trend the requirement and the of the country. The next slide, please. India's commitment to the low carbon economy. In its NDC, India is committed to achieve about 40% cumulative electric power capacity from non-fossil fuel energy resources by 2030. India's non-fossil fuel electric capacity, which includes renewables, largely hydro and nuclear, is about 38% of the electric mix as of September 2019. During the UN's Climate Week in New York, India's Prime Minister is committed to a target of 450 gigawatt of renewable installations likely by 2040. India is also committed to reduce the emission intensity of its GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030 from the 2005 levels. Next slide, please. Going together with the prospects of the international cooperation, India imports oil and coal from the BRIC countries and exports petroleum products to Brazil, China, and South Africa. Indian companies participate in consortia for development of oil and gas fields in the Far East in Tomsk region and deep water fields in Brazil. India actively cooperates with other BRICS nations in renewable energy. ISA is headquartered in India, and BRICS nations may join ISA, which will in turn strengthen cooperation in the solar energy field. To conclude, this sort of massive expansion calls for close cooperation amongst us in energy research, technology, exchange of information, knowledge, and best practices in the energy field to synergize our collective strength for strengthening the energy security of the BRICS nations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Yeah, very interesting. I mean, some of these objectives sound very futuristic, but so it will be interesting to see how they achieved over time. Thank you so much. Mr. Marcelo Pope. Mr. Pope is a senior advisor on energy at Brazilian Center of Energy Studies, and former Secretary of State for Energy Development and Minister of Mines and Energy in Brazil. He graduated in Innovation and Energy Systems Economics in France and in Electrical Engineering in Brazil. Mr. Poppe, when I read the report, I realized that Brazil is a country with an already very interesting energy and power mix that is very heavily already focused on renewables. Arguably somewhat different from the rest of the Brics countries. So it will be interesting to hear your views on the energy policy development in Brazil and on lessons that you learned as you developed into the current stage. Mr. Poppe, please. Mr. Poppe, I think your mic is muted. Yeah.
Are you hearing me? Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to the Center for Strategic Studies and Management in Science, Technology and Innovation, CGE, to represent Brazil in this panel of discussion on global trends in energy during the launching of the Brics Energy Report. I perceive cooperation opportunities for energy transition among Brics based on an approach of a positive agenda for climate change and sustainable development. Actually, opportunities for cooperation come not only of the joint effort to accomplish the Paris Agreement, aiming the increase of the nationally determined contribution ambition and the coming announcing of countries' long-term strategies, the CO2 emissions peak and the carbon neutrality, but also in order to achieve much of the targets of diverse sustainable development goals in the framework of the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations. The transition to a low carbon and a sustainable energy mix presents particularities regarding the starting line, the importance of emissions from the energy sector, and the objectives and instruments used by each country. Apart from the Brazilian case, the Brics have yet a low share of renewable sources in the energy mix. Analyzing the trends of the transition vectors, Brics countries need to accelerate the diffusion of renewables, but the efficiency gains associated with the expansion of modern renewables energy sources have been significant in the last years. China demonstrates a strong commitment to reduce emissions, and the scale of its renewable energy programs is notable. A high share of renewable energy sources characterizes the Brazilian transition, where biofuels have an outstanding participation in the fuel market, and use of new renewable sources, wind and solar, grows very fast, compensating the reduction of hydroelectric share. India and South Africa combine the energy transition goals to those of social inclusion through access to electricity. The abundance of fossil resources entails distinct path for Russia's engagement in the clean energy transition. Complementarities and similarities in the energy transition process result in opportunities for cooperation between the Brics, and there is much room for building a joint energy transition strategy, particularly concerning improving energy efficiency. The main features in the Brazilian energy agenda are appropriate management of abundance and diversity of renewable energy sources combined with digitalization, allowing a positive externalities and bringing social ecological benefits. Opportunities for business and investors' engagement in innovation and energy transition, and as a specific technology break, I can point out, for example, fuel cell powered by direct conversion of bioethanol. In fact, the Brics partnership in energy can take advantage of the findings of Energy Big Push Brazil, initiative led by the Brazilian Center for Strategic Studies and Management, CGE, the Brazilian Energy Research Office, the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and the International Energy Agency. The process has created a unique environment to share experience and knowledge, collect and process data on energy research and development and the performance of low-carbon energy technologies, and deepen the understanding of the country's landscape for energy innovation and associated policy incentives. The purpose of this approach is to support the promotion of more and better public and private innovation investment in sustainable energies, contributing to a useful energy big push in the countries. For those interested in the discussion on the nature and implications of energy transition strategy, the webinar Energy Big Push Accelerating Clean Energy Innovation in Brazil will take place next week on Friday, October 23, and registration is already available on the International Energy Agency webpage. Thank you very much for your attention, and cheers to the team of Brics Energy Research Cooperation Platform.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Again, it's interesting you mentioned a couple of technologies that we will be discussing in the next panel, so will be interesting to compare notes with that. Our last but not the least panelist is Dr. Magadam. Dr. Magadam is a senior energy analyst at Gas Exporting Countries Forum, based out of Doha. He holds a PhD from the University of Vienna, Austria, in energy and environmental management, with his research focus on the energy, oil, and gas sectors. He's been with this Gas Exporting Countries Forum since 2016, and again leads lots of the research projects, including preparation of the GCF global gas model and production of the 2050 outlook. Mr. Magadam, as you reflect on the report and comments from previous speakers, what are your thoughts on how the findings of the Brics Energy Report relate to your forecasts, especially as far as it relates to the increasing role of natural gas in the energy mix? Dr. Magadam, please.
Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to this virtual conference and for giving the GECF an opportunity to talk about the potential impact of the Brics countries on the energy markets from the perspective of the gas producers countries. I also would like to congratulate the Brics for the publication, its first study of the Brics Energy Report. As His Excellency Secretary General of the IEF mentioned, the uncertainties around the outlooks are large. However, as Dr. Mitrova said, there are many similarities in our views. Then, for better illustration and answering your questions, I prepared a few slides that I would like to share it with you here. Please, next one. Well, Gas Exporting Countries Forum, or the GCF, is a gathering of the world's leading gas producers. For the time being, we are an intergovernmental forum of 20 countries with 11 members and 9 observers spanning 4 continents. At present, jointly, the GCF member countries globally control 71% of the proven gas reserves, 45% of gas production, 53% of pipeline gas exports, and 60% of LNG exports. Next, please. Well, since 2016, we have provided the medium to long-term natural gas projections using the GCF Global Gas Model, or the GGM. The current version of the GGM covers 140 country-level forecasts with over 60 regional aggregates, which covers 33 sectors and 35 fields annually from 1990 to 2050. So the results that I'm going to present today is a structure in line with the recent GGM update, which is the October update. Next, please. Well, we see that last year, the prime energy demand in the Brics countries was more than 5,500 million ton oil equivalent. By 2050, it will increase by an annual average growth rate of 0.9% to about 7,500 million ton. Indeed, by 2050, more than 40% of the world energy demand will be originating from the Brics countries. Natural gas currently accounts for 30% of the energy mix, and its shares will increase to 18% more than any other fuel. In line with global trends due to the environmental policies in the Brics countries, the share of coal will drop to 30%, we see. Here also, maybe I should add one point, the difference in the renewable energies that I saw in the Brics report and us. I think that in the Brics report, just the share of renewables is higher. Why? Because you combine the share of hydro and biofuels in the renewables. Next, please. Well, gas demand in the Brics countries will increase by an overall of 83% from 860 BCM last year to about 1,570 BCM in 2050. Therefore, we expect that 27% of the world's gas demand originating from the Brics countries. And major growth is coming from the power generation, domestic and industry sectors. Also, the hydrogen extracted from natural gas, as well as gas demand in the transport sector, will have a significant contribution. Next, please. Well, last year, the share of the Brics countries stood at 15% of the global gas imports. And by 2050, this share will increase to 26%. Russia, one of the members of the GSTF, is the only net gas exporter of the Brics countries. Last year also started flowing gas through the power of Siberia, Line 1, into China. Also, last May, Gazprom began a feasibility study for the power of Siberia 2 project that would flow up to 50 BCM per year gas to China by crossing Mongolia. We see that by the boost of gas pipeline capacities, Russia can export up to 100 BCM gas into China by 2050. China is the largest natural gas market in the world, and with huge LNG gasification capacity projects, it is expected that to keep its position as the top LNG importer. We know that China is due to enter its fourth five-year plans development period, and there is no doubt that the role of natural gas in the Chinese economy will be strengthened. In India, natural gas has now become an important part of the energy mix, and the country is moving towards a gas-based economy. India has some of the most polluted cities in the world, and the government is promoting greater use of gas to fight against air pollution. In South Africa, gas will play a major role in shaping up its energy sector. Also, you mentioned at the beginning of this meeting that South Africa is pushing to diversify its energy mix away from coal, which currently supplies around 88% of the power generation sector. And in the transition to greener fuels, LNG plays an important role in the country. Next, please. Here we have the Brics gas exports and imports by flow time. We see that LNG accounts for 60 to 65% of the global gas imports to the Brics countries. In general, the LNG infrastructure has a much faster build-up than the pipelines, as it does not require intergovernmental agreements and it is less influenced by geopolitical pressures. Also, you talked about the technology. Yes, thanks to financial and technological developments such as FSRU, small-scale energy plants, or LNG ISO container trucks, LNG will become more accessible to new consumers in remote areas. We see such developments in China and India. Also, Brazil is widely using FSRU technologies. Around 126 MTPA new LNG gasification terminals across the world are under construction. About 95 of it are in Asia. On top is China with 53 and India with 20 MTPA. India's LNG import capacity has been steadily expanding in recent years. However, the growth will be dependent on the investment, government policy support, the downstream infrastructure, as well as price is important in India, in particular with coal and renewables. India, we know that also you said, has commitments for more than $60 billion to transform to gas-based economy. In South Africa, the government announced that its first LNG import terminal will be built at the port of Naguya, also known as Kuga. And we have to expect that the first gas to become delivered by 2024. We see that to meet this future energy demand, South Africa needs gas and LNG, and one of the options is to cooperate with the large suppliers, with the Brics countries to attract investment for constructing LNG regasification terminals. Brazil has typically bought LNG on a spot or short-term seasonal basis to support gas for power generation. There are two main LNG to power projects in Brazil. We expect new LNG import terminals to be built or developed in Brazil. Brazil is placed to be the center of LNG demand in Latin America. Also, Dr. Ben Youssef mentioned about the pre-salt, so I'm not covering it anymore. Russia is aiming to become a major player in the global energy markets. Gas projects on the Yamal, the Arctic, East Siberia, and the Far East will push Russian production. We estimate that Russia's LNG liquefaction capacity could reach around 110 million tons by 2040 and 140 million tons by 2050. So we see that Russia overtakes Australia as the world's third largest LNG exporter in the late 2030s. Next, please. Also, one slide about hydrogen, a hot topic in the shift to clean energy. At the GCF, we see hydrogen is the key to global decarbonization efforts. It can flow through existing networks. It may also be blended with other low carbon gases in the grid. Netherlands is widely working on it in order to access the impacts of the hydrogen on the total energy system. At the GCF, we are developing a scenario on the future of energy transition in the context of the hydrogen economy. Last year, over 300 million ton oil equivalent of energy are used for the production of hydrogen. It was 2% of global total primary energy demand. And natural gas accounted for around 3/4 of the hydrogen production. By 2050, we see that the share of renewable electricity or electrolyzers will increase to 35%. Steel gas will constitute 52% of the hydrogen production. The success of hydrogen is closely aligned with the future of natural gas, renewable energy, and carbon capture and storage technology. And to conclude, next slide, please. We see that gas will continue to play a robust role in the future energy mix and can contribute to fulfilling climate change objectives. At the GCF, we are ready to cooperate closely with the Brics. Already, we are involving in 18 platforms, including the UN. Our colleagues are here, IEF, OPEC, G20, IEA, ASEAN, IRENA, OLADE, and others. We are involved. We believe that gas plays a central role in delivering energy transitions and decarbonization. The GCF can provide sustainable gas supply for the Brics countries in their path to the energy transition period and help them to achieve sustainable development goals that they have. Also, I see that in the objectives and common area, the idea that you had in your last slide, it was the exchange of experience on the improving. We can do that on improving our energy ports. We can make it benchmark in our output, also exchange of the experience on expanding the use of gas, which is very related to the GCF. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That concludes our panel discussion. And I just want to say one more time, congratulations to all of the members of Brics Energy Research Corporation platform on this milestone event, publishing of the first energy report. We heard very interesting views today, and I believe it will be safe to conclude that there are numerous areas where Brics countries can further improve cooperation amongst themselves, as well as with other organizations. I want to thank my fellow panelists for bearing with us. I want to thank the organizers and also the interpreting team. Done a great job. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm personally looking forward to joining our further discussions in this field. Thank you very much. And a quick announcement: our next session will start at 5 to 4. So in about 10 minutes. So we have time for a very quick break. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm Petr Medvedev. I'm a partner at EY Global Energy Practice, and host of today's panel. First of all, I would like to start with congratulating all involved in production of Brics Energy Technology Report, this milestone, production of the first report. It would not be an easy task under normal circumstances, but current COVID-19 pandemic made it almost impossible, so thank you for making it happen, guys. As I read the report, I personally was fascinated with these 2 points. One is how different our countries are. We have very different resource base, we have very different population, we have very different level of industrialization, but at the same time, we have so many similarities and challenges and objectives that we all pursue. We all cleaner energy, we all want to use opportunities offered by digital technologies to build a better work in the world. We work on so many complementary topics, capitalizing on our individual and collective strengths. We just completed a session dedicated to the launch of Brics Energy Report, where we discussed changing energy balance of Brics countries, and none of you would be surprised that almost all of the changes in the energy mix are due to the technological changes that enable those. We discussed uncertainty caused by COVID-19 and issues created for energy sector by technologies that are becoming cheaper. We refer to, for example, the drop in solar and the cost of solar and wind by literally 3 times over the last 7 years. Same as the cost of storage is dropping dramatically. And what is interesting to me in this conversation is that while in the past economic crisis would normally would put a drag on decarbonization, today we actually expect this to be highly unlikely. We forecast the CO2 emissions will not surpass 2019 level, pre-COVID-19 levels until 2027, even though energy demand will return to the pre-COVID level well before that, hopefully. Again, it reflects changes in the energy mix in which renewables prove resilient and flourish in post-pandemic recovery. I hope today's discussion will help us to identify areas of future scientific and technological collaboration between Brics countries, but also between Brics countries and the external participants as well. On this, I pass it to our keynote speaker, Alex Daniev, who is the head of Competence Center of Technology Development of the Fuel and Energy Complex of the Ministry of Energy of Russia. Alex, please. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Даже нажимать, чтобы она двигалась назад и вперед. Ага, замечательно. Чудесно. Excellent. So I decided to kind of step here because we have a fascinating background, and I think it's going to be much better to promote the report. So, dear colleagues, it's my great pleasure to present the Brics Energy Technology Report, the study conducted by the energy platform of the Brics countries. And before starting, I'd like to express my deep gratitude to everyone who worked on the report, and primarily the representatives of countries and the experts community. Around 60 years ago, Robert Solow, an economist who got the Nobel Prize in 1987, determined that the key contributing factor of the country's rate of economic growth is organizational and technical innovation. And the study that we have presented today is the work that we have tried to jointly evaluate the opportunities for collaboration to create more technical innovations for the well-being of our citizens. In 2017, following the Brics summit in China, the countries agreed to provide all-round assistance in the development, production, and transfer of technologies in the energy sector. Technology cooperation is included in the list of priority areas of work within the Brics Energy Research Platform. In addition, in accordance with the terms of reference assigned to the energy platform, joint development of the energy technologies is one of the key areas of activities. In 2020, the Brics Energy Research Platform launched a study to identify the technological needs and mutual interests of the Union. There are two important processes of transformation in the global fuel and energy complex today. The first one is a transition to the Industry 4.0, and in general, the development of the new technologies. And the second one, the energy transition and the lean principles. Those two complement each other. In one way or another, those trends are aimed at solving the internal problem of the fuel and energy complex, like operational efficiency, reducing or at least keeping it at the current level of the lifting cost, making the operations more environmentally friendly and safe. And in addition, considering the transition to the much more data-intensive activities, the security management is becoming the routine priority for all of us. The set of challenges is quite enormous, but every challenge is opportunity for business, opportunity for people, and opportunity for the environment. We can extract the most of those opportunities by working together. The development of the new technologies in the energy and fuel sector generally takes more than 10 years. And if it is developed by one company or by one country in a narrow market, most likely the project will never pay off. In cooperation, companies usually save up to 25% of the cost per year. In addition, nowadays, it is not possible to accelerate the development by adding more resources, as the success of the projects is determined by the skilled personnel with the right set of competences. We are moving from the labor-intensive to the capital-intensive and to the knowledge-intensive environment. In this regard, the question arises of the international scientific technical cooperation that helps accelerating the speed of the development by jointly focusing the efforts to the most promising technologies, and by transferring technologies and specialists between geographies to utilize and flourish their potentials. To establish cooperation, we first need to know what we have in terms of competences and the needs, the variety of technologies that meets the criteria of common economic interest. The community was asked to fill out 3 questionnaires separately for the oil, gas, coal, and the energy sector. More than 500 technologies were included in the final questionnaire, and the survey took place in the second and the third quarter of 2020 and was supplemented with the information provided by representatives of the Brics countries. More than 60 companies from the fuel and energy complex of the Brics countries took part in the survey. The final report includes 90 technologies that respondents considered as the most prominent for the joint development. The main goal of the research were identification of the specific technological needs, assessment of the technology's impact on business and time frame when those technologies are going to be needed, assessment of the criticality of those technologies and in some extent its importance for the business continuity, assessment of the ability to create and produce those technologies in the BRIC countries, assessing the willingness of companies to cooperate between each other to develop these technologies, and identification of challenges that contribute to or hinder technical cooperation between the companies in the BRICS countries, governmental bodies, research institutes, and other public and private organizations. Three questionnaires that were sent to respondents included 12 technology groups, and the respondents had to evaluate each of more than 500 technologies according to these criteria: impact to the industry, time frame, probability of commercial use, relevance to the industry, opportunity for the domestic manufacturing, and willingness to cooperate. After receiving the results, the analysts can calculate the scores to determine the key for the union set of technologies. According to the acquired responses, the most relevant from the commercial point of view were technologies related to the digitalization, or in general, Industry 4.0 set of technologies, technologies for the energy transition, like 4R, reuse, recycle, remove, and reduce the greenhouse gases, as well as the lean technologies. By this term here, we understand the portfolio of technologies to reduce the total cost of ownership and increase efficiency. Experts, in addition to the processing the questionnaire result, took into account the competencies of the BRICS countries. For example, the strong competence in BRICS countries noted, such as set of related to biofuel energy technologies in Brazil, hydrogen production technologies, small hydropower plant and nuclear power plant construction expertise in Russia, the production of catalysts for the oil refining and petrochemicals in South Africa, competences in the field of microelectronics, steelmaking, heavy machinery production, renewable energy equipment production in China, and the software and petrochemical development in India. After analyzing the available sources and collecting data provided by the representatives of the Brics countries and trade representatives, the main needs for the countries have been identified. Examples include high-power gas turbines for Russia, heavy oil refining technologies for Brazil, smart grids technology for South Africa, hydrogen energy technologies for China, and technologies processing by products of coal mining for India. By understanding the needs and competences of the Brics countries, it will be easier to set up technological cooperation in the areas identified during the research. Examples shown on the slide include the technologies that received the highest score from previous slide. Examples shown on the slide includes the technologies that received the highest score from the respondent that are priorities for the development in the upcoming years. The development and implementation of such technologies may take up to 10 years if there is no international scientific and technical cooperation. And there are just a few examples of the project that may potentially go live in the future. Pure aluminum oxide, the technologies that we have a strong competencies in Brazil and Sasol, that is the interest of all Brics countries. Complex processing of ash and slags waste from coal mines technologies of Russian Far East Federal University with a demand from China and India. Catalyst for the synthesis of polyolefins technology owned by Sinopec with a strong interest from Russian side. Wind turbines produced by Indian West with a demand from Brazil and China. And bioethanol energy and technologies coming from Brazilian Kosan that could be of interest to all Brics countries. As mentioned previously, according to the result, the most relevant from the commercial point of view were technologies related to digitalization, clean energy technologies, as well as lean optimization. As an example, for the oil and gas industry, we may mention multilateral well construction technologies, smart field equipment technologies, technologies related to the of the future initiatives such as fully automated modules, ultra-fast communication channels, petroleomic sensors, in situ molecules conversion. For the energy sector, it could be high-capacity energy storages, equipment and technologies for the megawatt class wind-powered turbines, smart grids, and for the coal sector, autonomous vehicles for the wide range of application and exploration and production, coal chemistry equipment and technologies, and new geochemical research methods. And all elements, of course, that related to the circular economy technologies and hydrogen-related pool of technologies. Joint development production of those technologies could bring to the countries in the Union up to $2 trillion of growth in the company's capitalization, substantial reduction in the greenhouse gases emission, create several million jobs, reduce the accident rate related to those industries, and substantially increase operational efficiency. In post-crisis period, it is important to harmonize standards, jointly develop technologies, create available for the Union countries pool of the lessons learned, and share best practices for the energy policies and regulations that could be considered of the interest for all participants in the energy market. As further steps, experts considered that it would be possible to create working groups to identify and launch projects for the technical partnership and build systematic cooperation in the field of engineering and technology. The experts suggest the following models of cooperation, where two or more countries with the common interest establish a set of the working group to form industrial partnership. Such groups will help to the industry technical experts, industry representatives, and researchers with the related competences who can launch a new stage of cooperation between the Brics countries in research, development, manufacturing, and deployment. We may consider starting real project work within this framework. Ultimately, only by joint effort we can make significant progress in the development of technologies to address socioeconomic and environmental challenges. I would like one more time thanks to all participants in this research for your inputs and responses, and hope this productive work will be a good start for the strong and productive technical collaboration. And for the final note, I would like to quote the Russian Minister of Energy, Mr. Alexander Novak, from his report, that there are numerous areas of the technological cooperation in the fuel and energy sector that we should work on together. Thank you very much. And if there are going to be any questions, I would be happy to answer. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alec. So, as I said, I personally was very kind of entertained when I read the report. It has a fascinating information. And today, I have a great pleasure of hosting a panel of distinguished experts, some of them virtually, some of them in person, which is fantastic. Talk about technological developments that they see to be most relevant over the next 5 to 10 years. Interesting enough, when we prepared for today's session, it was fascinating for me to see how similar some of our thinking is. It's almost every single conversation we had referred to hydrogen, which seems to be the flavor of the year. I think we debated if it is a strictly 2020 phenomenon, because hydrogen kind of follows a 7-year cycle, or if it's the beginning of a more thoughtful discussion regarding commercial use of hydrogen, be it yellow, turquoise, green, or blue. We also discussed the role of the government in supporting technological developments, and it would probably be fair to say that we concluded with most of our panelists that the role of the government should be to define the end objective, for example, reduction in CO2 emission, and mechanisms that will prompt the market to achieve this objective, rather than place bets on individual technologies, be it solar, wind, green hydrogen, or anything else. Again, we'll be very keen to hear a perspective of our distinguished speakers on this issue as well. As we continue our discussion today, I'll be asking each of the speakers, especially each of the country representatives, to answer 2 questions. And again, they will echo what Oleg had in his presentation. Development of which technology your country can lead for further export of this technology to other Brics countries, and vice versa. Which technology your country would gladly import if it's developed and becomes available from a different Brics country? On this, our first panelist is Marcio Zetman. Marcio is a key technical vice president elected in 2018 and an Electrobras chief transmission officer. His main experience relates to technology development, especially given that he had a very long and distinguished career at the Brazilian National Research Center. Marcio, again, given your experience with both global trends and in Brazilian technologies used in the energy sector, what would you say are the main trends in energy generally, but with specific focus on transmission that we should watch out for over the next 5 to 10 years? Marcio?
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me well?
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you very much for this invitation, Peter. I will make a short introduction and I will address the 2 questions raised by you. First of all, I'm coming from the electric power industry, both from a company perspective and also from Sigrea, which I hope I'm having the honor to be the technical director. To this 4.0 industry and the 3Ds or 5Ds, I would add another very important aspect, which is 100% of electrification of the societies. And why the hydrogen, the green hydrogen, which is, I think, is the most relevant hydrogen from the electric power industry standpoint, why it's time for it to come? Because with the 4.0 industries, 4.0 industry era, you don't have the borders so well defined. It's more or less melting the borders between system to system. So hydrogen can reach a very high scale and then can be cost effective in terms of applications. So I think it's coming. and coming very soon. Because of this 4.0 and 3D, etc., all the electricity reforms managed and conceived in the 1990s have to be reevaluated now. For instance, the boundary between transmission and distribution is no longer so clear, so distinguished, and this will represent a very dramatic change or transformation in the industry, in the market, in the business of electric power utilities in the world. So we are in a new, let's say, we're starting from scratch more or less in terms of business reform, a business framework. Also, in terms of the word decarbonization, I prefer using the carbon-free semantic word, because carbon-free means really that we are going to reach a full, clean and renewable world in the next future. Peter, answering your two questions. Brazil has one system operator. Brazil is a continental scale country with one system operator for the whole country. So we have developed very sophisticated online and dispatch and planning and operations softwares, which are being used for many years, which can be used for our partners in the Brics contest. I think this will be the most relevant aspect we could export, let's say, if you think so, in terms of what we could learn and gain from other Brics countries. Because we have 85 clean and renewable energy matrix in the power sector, we are, let's say, a little behind in terms of distributed generators and electric mobility. Probably other countries would get benefit to sharing experience and giving us some good advice on how to implement and to improve these sectors. Peter, this is my short contribution to this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, very, very interesting, and it's interesting that I think your points about these two technologies somewhat overlap with what Oleg presented, but also it gives us a kind of fresh food for thought. Thank you very much. Our next presenter is Nikolai Parfenty. Nikolai is the Director of Digitalization and IT at Rosseti. For those who outside of Russia, Rosseti is an operator of energy grids in Russia that, amongst other things, maintains 2.4 million kilometers of power transmission lines. I'm not going to even count how many times it can go around the globe. Nikolai himself has extensive experience of working both in Russia as well as outside of Russia in countries like Kazakhstan and Belarus, and has first-hand experience with implementation of renewable projects. So it's a good combination of more traditional companies and very kind of cutting-edge renewable. Nikolai, question to you is that we heard from Oleg and we heard from Marcio references to Industry 4.0, which obviously no conversation about this topic would be complete without discussion of digital technologies. I'm personally glad that most of these conversations nowadays focus on substance and real-life cases rather than just some hypothetical use cases and hype. And I wonder again, your experience, what is the role of digital technologies in transformation of operations and agenda of energy companies? Nikolai.
Thank you so much, Peter. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'd like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to speak up here. I'd like to thank all the panelists, anyone who contributed to the report. Taking a question on the role of digitalization, certainly, it would be great to show Oleg's slide, who actually highlighted what role is played by digital technologies, but in a nutshell, the role of technologies and digitalization on the one hand is about increasing the main business processes, and the second is about creating new services. And under the conditions of rising the role of consumers, we don't have to be left behind. Many speak about COVID-19, and there is an objective to set up the energy and fuel man-free technologies. COVID-19 agenda increases the demand that the infrastructure can operate without a man. Unmanned technology, so to say, in energy sector. Oleg has already said, and the report also says that technologies evolve for 5 to 10 years. And if we include standardization into that period of time, then this time frame would be even longer. Taking a question, I actually would split that into certain boxes, smaller boxes, where there would be dependence between the technologies and their maturity. For instance, the first box would include the technologies which are mature, which are being installed, and which will be still relevant for several decades more. We speak about the power grids. For us, this is the question of smart stations or substations, instrumentation and automation. I do think that Russia can be useful for Brics nations because Rosneft has more than 30 different standards on smart substations elements, which can be very useful for other Brics members. Report also highlighted that this technology is quite promising. The smart instrumentation. We, as a grid company, also bet on that, and until 2030, we plan to install more than 18 million meters, and we are cooperating with the foreign partners in that area. As concerns the technologies to manage this infrastructure, I would like to mention SCADA technologies and STU. Marcel said that Brazil has dispatching technologies, and we believe that we have also quite competitive technologies in terms of SCADA. And we can partner in that sense. Bear in mind that there are some cybersecurity threats and challenges, and shutdowns in a number of countries only highlight this danger. We can partner not only in the sense of exchanging software, but we can share experience, for instance, setting up some startups in cybersecurity. This can be just the very beginning of our cooperation. The second box of technologies, these are the technologies, and I represent business in that sense. The business would realize that these technologies may bring some results, but there is a number of engineering objectives which remain unaddressed. There are some lacunes or some gaps in terms of streamlining and legislation. Such boxes, such technologies would include the technical vision for diagnostics. This is about the HSE questions and equipment and construction technologies. Bear in mind the digitalization, we have to compute and process more and more data on site. We as a grid company see that we would need mini data centers which can be located right on site. And we are developing such data centers on our own. We actually are developing semi-submersible data centers which can be installed right on site. I do think that digital construction and digital designing also has to be part of that process. Many countries are focusing on that, and very soon we'll be able to design the workflow. It will be just like a Lego. You will not need to bear so heavy capital costs. Some work is being done there, and we will need collaboration among the original equipment manufacturers, because actually the equipment has to match the software as well. A lot's been said about the batteries or energy accumulators, so to say, but I will say that it is rather as a redundancy thing or some standby element. And for instance, that can be used in some remote areas where you cannot build power generation of high capacity or large scale. And the third box would include the technologies. As far as actually some technologies would require more than 3 decades to take the shape, you have to bet on the technologies which can make a breakthrough. Some disruptive technologies, for instance, it might be high temperature superconductors. If we speak about smart grids, Power City in 2020 did a test of 2.5 kilometers long of high temperature superconducting line. This is a record-setting long line. Such similar tests were done by the United States, Korea, and Japan. In 2021, we are going to commission that line in St. Petersburg. All in all, this third box actually can act as a very good field for cooperation between BRICS nations. Summing up, in terms of cybersecurity, actually, I think that it would be very expedient to set up a CERT in terms of ready-made technologies. In fact, we can offer to buy or to sell ready-made technologies, and we can exchange experience in all the lines, in all the 3 directions which I have outlined. That's it. I did not answer your 2 questions. In the part where we see our potential as Russia, I have already said. Secondary equipment and dispatching systems, this is what we may offer. But what could be very interesting for us? For instance, if the market sees a technology which could be efficient in terms of its capacity and may act as a very good battery, as a good accumulator, for instance, charging and discharging costs would be so low that you can use that technology as something to regulate supply and demand in order to somehow mitigate the peaks. That would be very interesting. If it is a hydrogen-based technology or something else, it doesn't matter. But if such technology emerges, it would be very interesting for us.
Again, very interesting approach from a private sector point of view. I think Oleg had a question to Marcio and a quick remark on your presentation.
Yep. Thank you so much, Peter. Actually, it would be interesting, because Marcin has mentioned a strong link between the Industry 4.0 and hydrogen, and I'm just curious to hear your opinion, because I think in 80s, last century, Lockheed Martin has been working on the development of the engine, working on the hydrogen, and actually in Russia, Tupolev in 1989, I think, launched the first plane with an engine operated by liquid hydrogen. So we see a kind of a new wave, like 30 years past, that again, another huge attention to the hydrogen technology. Like, what do you see the reason? Because at that time, there was also a spike of the media attention, but in reality, the production, the activity did not go to the mass. And do you believe that it's going to be different this time? It's not going to be just a hype for 3-5 years? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can I answer?
Please do.
Thank you very much. This is very interesting. We have many isolated experiences with hydrogen, which did not solve the main issue, which is cost or economic feasibility. And probably this is not going to be achieved if we follow on with isolated projects. What is interesting now is that if you see the potential of penetration of hydrogen into many other sectors, transportation, industrial sectors, ship transportation, storage. If you see the whole chain of applications, then the self-cost or inherent cost of hydrogen will be diluted into all these applications. So from my point of view, this is a different situation. We are talking about a scalable utilization of hydrogen, especially green hydrogen if you take it from renewable sources, which now will match the equation of economic viability through all these applications outside the electrical sector. And this is going to be to my opinion, the decisive point that will make hydrogen feasible in a short time.
Thank you so much. And Nikolai has mentioned several times word standards, and it's actually quite interesting in the sense that indeed in the report we also mentioned several times that the unification of the standards among the Brics countries is quite important, because indeed if the countries working on the different standards, you know, the market's going to be quite isolated. So indeed for the producers and for the consumers, the unification of standards is going to be quite beneficial. What do you think about another approach that, and you know, this may be the question to all panelists, whether it would be worth to promote the approach like Toyota has launched I think in 2019, when they announced that all patents that they had related to the electrical vehicle is going to be publicly available. So whether jointly we should create a pool of the technologies, a pool of the patents, or kind of best practices, lesson learns available for the all Brics countries, for the topics, for the technological directions that we believe is going to be the most promising for the future, to promote those directions and to ensure that we would be able to accelerate the development in this area. Because even again, going back to the hydrogen technologies, right now for the transportation of hydrogen, there is a few countries that have a very strong patent position on the transportation, on the methods of transportation, and this may hinder the development of and dissemination of the distribution of the hydrogen technologies. What do you think about this?
I would actually split that question to 2 parts. First of all, really this is about standards, but on the other hand, these are about patents. If we speak about publicly available standards, this is very beneficial for the economy in general and for every country. As you have said, only acting together we can do more, and this would be a step towards consolidation. Speaking about electricity, everyone actually is following the International Energy Commission's standards. You have to pay some money, but it is not too costly. It's a matter of several hundreds of dollars. So it means that this is quite peanuts. This is not totally free, but this is not a huge amount of money. And many probably will agree with me on that. But as patents are concerned, that's a very philosophical question. This is not a question which may be answered black and white. This is about the competition between competitive and non-competitive economies. If we discuss that, probably we'll speak hours.
Thank you, everyone. And again, fascinating discussion. So if next speakers, if you have any points or comments on this, please do include them in your in your speeches. I'll very gladly introduce Dr. Rob Steven. Dr. Steven was born in Johannesburg in South Africa and holds BSc, MSc, and MBA degrees, as well as a PhD in overhead line design. He retired from Eskom early this year, where he held position of Master Specialist in the Technology Group. responsible for distribution and transmission technologies of all voltages covering both AC and DC. He was also responsible for smart grid technology for ESCOM. He authored over 100 technical papers and was the international president of SIGRE from 2016 to 2020. He's a fellow of South African Institute of Electrical Engineers and was awarded the President's Award in 2016. He is currently an academic at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, based out of Durban. Dr. Steven, when we discuss with you, again, there are obviously global trends and there are trends that were identified in the Brics report. How do you see them interacting among themselves, and what do you see the mutual benefits and mutual enrichment between the Brics trends and broader global trends? Mr. Simmons, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. The trends on a global scale is not unlike the trends within Brics. If you start looking at the increase in renewable generation and the trend for decarbonization, so that trend is common. I think within the Brics community, we've got different levels of course going to the renewable side, and each of our grids and generation are at different levels of development. In South Africa, we've at the present situation, we have a very aging coal fleet, and there is a need to, in fact, to replace our aging coal fleet within the next 10 years. In fact, we have to put in 27 gigawatts of new generation. Now, our total demand at the moment is around about 41, between 36 and 40 gigawatts, and our installed capacity is about 41, of which our reliable generation at the moment is around about 28. So we've actually got quite a challenge at the moment, and we need really quite generation technology that is that can be funded, and coal and oil based technologies, in fact, do not attract a lot of funding. We also need to have technologies that can be rapidly installed, such as gas and renewables. Now, the issue with renewables, of course, as we all know, is the inverter-based resources, besides being not there all the time and not being dispatchable, is also doesn't have the inertia and the stability requirements. So we need to get some storage or some, as was mentioned previously, the digitalization and the control of the grid relating to very low inertia systems. And the other big issue within South Africa, of course, is we are very likely to install a lot of wind and a lot of solar in the up until 2020, around about 17 to 20 gigawatts. The challenge there, of course, is to link it to the grid, because where the renewable is in South Africa, is not where the load is, or where the existing generation is, where the coal is. So we're looking at building around 8,000 kilometers of high voltage transmission lines, 765 kV and 400 kV, over the next 10 years to integrate the renewable or inverter-based generation into the grid. The IRP, or the Integrated Resource Plan, is looking at around 5,000 megawatt of storage, which excludes pump storage. In my opinion, I think this might be a little bit too high. If you want storage for dispatchable, I'd rather use gas. So my thinking is that, my opinion is that we most probably going to need a lot of gas generation. Now, the problem is we don't have a big gas infrastructure in the country. And I think this is where, as you said, where one of the trends is, if you look at the trends, it's the increase in gas energy being used, and the ability and knowledge within Russia to in fact deliver on gas and design gas networks, in fact, I think will become really important. Also, the ability to manage large, low inertia systems, which is experienced within India and other areas within Brics. I think that would be something which is really important coming in. As you mentioned, the installation of millions of smart meters and so on. We have not really rolled out a lot of the smart meter technology due to funding. We have actually had quite a bit of experience in open protocol specifications. So we have actually developed a fairly sophisticated specification and strategy relating to smart grid, which includes the important cybersecurity side. So that kind of knowledge that we have as well. South Africa is an area where we have very remote areas. We have very high lightning densities and very high altitudes. Johannesburg is at around 1,800 meters. So the whole knowledge that we have, I think, could also be useful within the Brics countries for that kind of specifications as we shared. Also, of course, our coal to oil technology, which is around Sasol and petroleum products. I think that's something we could also share with. And then looking at, as was mentioned by my Seagrey colleague Marcia, relating to hydrogen, I think in the longer term, because of the large amount of renewables going to be installed, of course, you normally get then non-dispatchable. To avoid duck curves, you actually need some kind of a load for the renewables, and the production of hydrogen from renewable generation is something that is being looked at. And I think that the cost of electrolyzers, as was mentioned in India, where they're looking at 1,000 megawatt electrolyzers, if we can get that price down to half of what it is now, I think we'll have something that is really exportable into the Brics countries from South Africa. And of course, the other benefit of South Africa is that it's a gateway to Africa. So we have a lot of experience in electrification and in dealing with the other African countries, which is something which I think will benefit the Brics countries from a technology export and knowledge export going into Africa. And Africa, of course, is one of the growing areas within the world at the moment. So I think from that point of view, we've got a lot to share and a lot to gain from each other going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. To me, I think it almost deserves a separate conversation whether this decentralized distribution system that Africa needs, whether you need to go through kind of more traditional stages of its development, or you can actually leapfrog and as you said, move from the currently coal-fed generation to something which would be far more eco-friendly. Yeah. Like it looks like you questions. I saw you were playing. But no, I mean, big thing in the end. It's fascinating to hear that of the needs, but also of the experience you have in this field. Thank you very much. Next speaker is Mr. Dan Dorner. Dan, who is the head of Clean Energy Ministerial Secretariat based in Paris. Clean Energy Ministerial brings together a community of the world's largest and leading countries, companies, and international experts. So it's really, it's a forum for not only governments but also for corporates as well and experts as well. Focus on one thing: accelerate clean energy transition. Prior to his SAM role, Dan served as the head of international energy for the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy in the UK, and was a senior official advising UK ministers on bilateral and multilateral energy policies. Same as represented the UK at a range of international energy fora, including G20, G7, and led the UK government strategic relationship with several multinational energy companies. Dan, given your role, and again, I know we discussed it with you, but what's your view on the role of the government when it comes to development of technologies? Should they place their bets, or should they rather set the overall objective and policy measures designed to achieve it, and let the invisible hand of the markets deal with the rest? That's my first question. The second question, I'll be slightly provocative. We kind of mentioned nuclear a couple of times, but nobody really kind of expanded on it. Arguably and statistically, one of the safest technologies, if you look at in the entire cycle, but perceived very differently by citizens and governments of various countries. From your point of view, does nuclear have a future? Dan, please.
Brilliant. Thank you, Peter. Excellent questions. And let me pick them up as I make a few broad remarks as well. Look, very firstly, an absolute pleasure to join everyone here today and have this discussion. As you say, the Clean Energy Ministerial really has one mission, which is to accelerate global clean energy transitions. We bring together coalitions on the issues and technologies of importance to them. And this point is important, I think, the flexibility to bring these coalitions in line with their own interests, with our own member countries' interests. And the Clean Energy Ministerial is proud that we can count all of the Brics countries as being active members. And we're also very engaged in our recent 11th Clean Energy Ministerial meeting hosted by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, alongside its G20 Energy Ministerial just a few weeks ago. So the Brics, as a group and individually, represent a hugely important group of countries in terms of setting and dictating many future energy supply and demand trends now and in the future. We know this, the reports are being discussed today have already highlighted this. And that also holds true for clean energy. As the reports today have helped show, be it in bioenergy, hydropower, solar, wind, nuclear, batteries, grids, the list goes on. A lot of the Brics countries are really playing leading roles in a lot of these areas of the overall clean energy space. So I think the role of clean energy will grow in the Brics, and the role of the Brics in clean energy will continue to grow and continue to be increasingly important. And just to touch on there and make very clear, one of the questions that you raised there about the important role of nuclear, I do see a continuing important role for nuclear globally. I think it's going to be one of those technologies where for some markets, for some countries, they're going to find it very important. As I've already highlighted, it is part of the Clean Energy Ministerial's work program. We have active work programs on nuclear as we speak, including campaigns about the role of potential innovative new nuclear technologies, be it small modular reactors, and also actually at our recent Clean Energy Ministerial, we published a new report around the role of nuclear playing a role in terms of flexibility alongside other clean energy technologies. So it's certainly still a very important part of our remit and of our work. But let me also just touch on both the status and size of the clean energy market. You would expect me to talk about clean energy given my role. The active collaboration we already see happening with and beyond the Brics countries. And also we can talk a bit about the role of governments as well, because I think the role of governments in the clean energy transition space is absolutely critical, first and foremost in terms of leadership. So rather than actually necessarily choosing the particular winners, which I think we really want markets and competition and consumers to make those choices wherever possible, but the political leadership, the government leadership to show the markets the direction that they want to go in is very important. But actually, when we look at the clean energy space today, it can feel like there's a huge amount of progress happening, which there is, a huge amount of growth happening, which there is. But also, actually, when we look at an assessment, from the International Energy Agency, it says that when it looks across the full suite of clean energy technologies and sectors, according to its latest Tracking Clean Energy Progress report, only 6 out of 46 technologies and sectors that it tracks are on track as it dictates, and 16, it actually says, were described as woefully off track. What does that mean? Well, that means all countries are hearing the message from the IEA and others that they need to do more in the clean energy space. Also aligned with that, countries and companies right now are even more laser focused right now on looking for drivers of economic growth. They'd be doing that in normal times, but even more so now in response to the economic impact of COVID-19. And many countries are committing themselves to ensuring that clean energy has a central role to play in driving a rapid and sustainable recovery. And this means that investments in a lot of markets are increasing in efficiency, in renewables, in building retrofits, for example, especially in areas that can really drive jobs and drive growth at a time when the world certainly needs it. And actually, most of the most important clean energy technologies are already proven from a technical perspective and already in some stage of market deployment. So knowing that the technical solutions are either there or are emerging really puts affordability, cost, market creation and large-scale deployment into sharper focus from a policy perspective. It means that across sectors, across technologies, we need to move rapidly from early adoption to mass market and from mass market to massive market. I mean, we can already see, Irina says that in 2019, investments in renewables and other transition-related technologies were around $825 billion. This is a huge market and a huge market opportunity. But the call's now really to push the billions into trillions, both to support recovery and beyond, and also to support millions of new clean energy jobs. And I think it's not really a question anymore of whether clean energy technologies are going to be a huge economic and business opportunity over the next several decades. It's really a question of how big, or for each individual technology, quite when and where that's going to happen. Because the clean energy world, as we know, is moving very quickly, and it really does reward bold action. Now, just lastly, I just highlight, again, looking at the space of clean energy collaboration, international collaboration, and looking at the Brics specifically. So when we look across our work program in the Clean Energy Ministerial, we can already see that all of the Brics are very active in all of the areas that they've decided that are important for them. So just as a quick rundown, Brazil is very active in our work program in renewable energy, bioenergy, smart grids, hydrogen and energy efficiency. Russia on smart grids, energy efficiency, nuclear and hydrogen. India, smart grids, efficiency, bioenergy, CCUS, hydrogen, electric vehicles. China, just the other week, launched with Canada and others a new campaign on the moving to low carbon and zero carbon, medium and heavy duty vehicles, but more broadly is active in our work program on renewables, electric vehicles, smart grid, CCUS and efficiency. And South Africa as well on renewables, smart grid, CCUS, nuclear again, bioenergy and energy efficiency. So many of the areas I'm very pleased to see that are being highlighted as potential areas for cooperation across the Brics countries are already areas that they're also very active in our clean energy community, and therefore engaging with the broader global clean energy community for this cooperation. So I think, look, very lastly, I just say, look, Brics are obviously already key energy countries, and they're also key clean energy countries, full stop. We're very proud to have all of them be within our membership and to be very active within our membership. I think they both bring and receive great value in how they contribute to our overall clean energy community. And I think a lot is already happening on the clean energy collaboration space internationally, but it's only going to grow. Clean energy transitions are far from done. The race is far from run. There's still a lot to learn and a lot to be gained from new clean energy collaborations and coalitions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think your remarks remind me of I think it's an African proverb, correct me if I'm wrong, that it takes a village to raise a child. And in this case, it looks like it will take definitely more than one country to raise this clean energy child. And again, it's really paved the way for international collaboration that Oleg highlighted in his presentation as well. Peter?
Then thanks so much for the excellent for the excellent comments. And please let me ask quite a provocative questions that, in the continuum of the discussion that we had quite routinely in the G20. So there is no medicine that fits all. And the same, like when we're saying that the clean energy should be promoted and should take a substantial part in the energy mix. I think there is no question about this. But I think the question that I would like to ask you is like, where's the balance between the traditional hydrocarbons and being working for my entire career in hydrocarbon industry, so for me it's quite important as well, to understand like where's the era will come to end. And if you look at the all forecast, according to the International Energy Agency or BP outlook, every single outlook forecasts that in the energy mix, the consumption of the hydrocarbons will increase in total mass. And we can say that that the percentage-wise it may differ, but even percentage-wise, like if we look for like 2035, 2040, during the yesterday's ministerial discussion, everybody's agreed that still the hydrocarbons take a substantial part in the energy mix. So, how to find the balance, and what should the government do in this sense, to ensure that going towards the clean energy, we will ensure that SDG 7 also will be fulfilled. Thank you.
It's an excellent question, and probably one that deserves a very long answer from lots of experts, I'm sure. But let me just give you a few quick points from my perspective. Look, as I say, firstly, from the Clean Energy Ministerial's perspective, our work program covers all clean fuels, all clean technologies. We include CCUS in our work program, we include nuclear in our work program, we include energy efficiency in our work program. So for us, the point is about the ends in terms of the emissions, rather than about kind of the technical means with which we get there. So from that perspective, I consider us being kind of quite inclusive in terms of the solutions that we are looking to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. Secondly, I would say, as you rightly highlight, there is a definite reason why I highlight the fact that we're about accelerating clean energy transitions, plural, because it's really important to recognize that everyone is at a different starting place with different endowments, different opportunities. And so there's not going to be any one size fits all, and I absolutely believe that. The third point I'd make is I think it's really important for governments to set the long-term direction of travel. I think long-term targets, goals, strategies that then send the signals to the investors, to the businesses on what they should be focusing on, I think is really important. I think, if I think from my experience in the United Kingdom, I think moving to a net zero goal was a huge signal, not just to the kind of traditional electricity power sector, but to every sector, to the whole community, the whole economy, that they all had a responsibility to think about what their transition was going to be to get to net zero by 2050. And I think we're also seeing that in the context of the European Union now, with its target to be a carbon neutral continent by 2050 as well. So I think whatever the choice of the exact goal is, I think that long-term signal and a commitment to that long-term signal with an underlying strategy is really important. Very lastly, I think when I look at the huge endeavor that we have in front of us to decarbonize our world, not just our energy system in terms of releasing of CO2 into the atmosphere. Even when we look at the IPCC reports and like the 1.5 degree reports, they're very clear that we need to pull every lever. We need kind of every technology, every tool in the toolbox to achieve this at the pace that we need to achieve it. And in some ways, that also applies to the market in the fact that we need not just the new players, not just the growth players, not just the interesting kind of up-and-coming garage to billionaire IT companies, but the incumbents have really got to get on board too. They're often the ones who own a lot of the existing infrastructure, that have the greater access to finance to be able to make these big investments, that have the technical know-how to do it when we're working at these kind of large scales. So I think we also need to have these discussions with a lot of the incumbent energy companies, and certainly that's what I've done over several years.
Thank you very much. It's really insightful. And very pleased to introduce last but not the least speaker, Nikita Lubchenko. Nikita is a senior petroleum economist at Wood McKinsey who started his career, as he insisted I say, at Deloitte. Nikita specializes on economic analysis and economic modeling in oil and gas sector, which is personally, again, very close to my heart. In his capacity, Nikita has been advising numerous governments on the fiscal policy and economic policy, and is personally very very passionate about the overall theme of energy transition. Nikhil, a couple of questions to you in addition to my standard question regarding export-import of technologies. As an economist, which technologies do you see as being most promising, specifically in oil and gas space, over, say, the next 5 years? And then referring to Nikolai's kind of 3 boxes, and then say the next kind of 10 to 15 years horizon. And how, in these boxes, how do we differentiate the technologies that have a chance of success versus those that just kind of make the highlight and just hype technologies? Please.
Great. Thanks, Peter, for your introduction. First of all, I would like to thank Oleg for his presentation on the technology report. This is really interesting. I think it's really important to, to collaborate all together in the BRICS countries and, put the further collaboration, like the further steps we need to do to collaborate in different technologies. But the main conclusion actually from the report was that the 2 emerging things which everyone is talking about is regarding the digitalization, which Nick was talking about, and the green technologies. And the thing is, I'm like from the global perspective that the world is changing. There is a Paris Agreement from 2015 about the reducing of emissions. So the technologies are really emerging, right? And they're emerging not only in the purely clean space and renewable energy, but also in the hydrocarbons. So, for the speaking about the public and private investors who are working in all kind of energy, energy sectors, they are now trying to push back from the carbon-intensive projects because the carbon price is going up, and it's more valuable for them to go somewhere else. So, speaking about the technologies, I would say that they currently face the survival of the fittest, I would say. So, basically, if we were talking about the hype technologies and the technologies which are real, the ones which are economically viable in the mid-term and in the long term, this will maintain, right? So speaking about the, for example, hydrogen a little bit, obviously it's currently on the radars. Everyone is talking about the green hydrogen. However, if you look at costs, I mean, they will be obviously reducing by 2040, but as of now, I mean, it's not the technology which is competing with other cheaper sources of energy, because different countries are facing different agendas, and some of them are emerging, some of them require cheaper energy, to fulfill their very fast growing consumption, like in India, because we heard about this in the previous session. But we should remember also that the hydrocarbons are still, the bulk, the main part of our energy mix currently, and will be the same in 15 years. I mean, by our assumption, the peak demand for hydrocarbons will be in 2036, in power sector 2030, but it's still, even it's in a sunset phase, it will not still be reduced by the huge amount. So renewables won't be the majority of the thing, right? So because of this, the technologies related to oil and gas sector are really important. For example, I mean, obviously each of the countries has their own, specializations, I would say. Russia, of course, is very good in, multi-lateral drilling or, measurement while drilling technologies, or lodging while drilling technologies, and also arc drilling. Brazil can be very good in the pre-salt drilling and deep water, etc. I mean, I can expand a lot. This is all in the report. But what I can say, and actually referring to your question about the collaboration and the Toyota, I think currently, because the race is really is at the beginning, and it will be increasing in the next 5 to 10 years, it's very important to collaborate. And if, for example, BRICS countries will, elaborate similar standards, it will be the pace for developing technologies which will be economically viable and will be competing on the global market, and will be appetite for them globally. I think then the BRICS countries will thrive, even not speaking about the BRICS themselves, but as a global competitors for everybody else. That's my short description. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
I have one. You mentioned the cost of high carbon, and so what is the fair cost of carbon?
Fair cost of carbon?
Yeah.
this is a philosophical question. I mean, I would say in oil and gas industry, by our calculations, the current internal assumptions for majors to go into the very carbon intensive projects is around $70 per megaton, but obviously it will be increasing further, I would say, in the next 5 years, just because there is additional push from the environmental bodies, from the governments. So it's like it's not only related to the pure economics; it's also related to the strategies which we determined even on the summit, for example.
It is a bit of a trick question, yeah, because I think it will largely depend also on the preferences of citizens and consumers, but and also as I think as Nikita said it, on the desire of the end users of the energy to actually pay a premium. Again, fascinating conversation. To me, first of all, I want to say once again, congratulations to the Brics team for producing the report. Thank you for all the panelists and participants. To me, one of the probably key criteria of success of sessions like this is actually number of notes that participants take, and I can see that my fellow panelists and people in the audience have been taking quite a few notes, and hopefully, Oleg, we will help you to enrich the content of your next report once you produce it. Clearly, lots of areas for cooperations within Brics and between Brics and organizations outside of Brics. So once again, big thank you. Lots of things to do, and let's raise that clean energy child. And thank you.